As a preface, mine is not as artistic as some of the other presentations, but hopefully it can be just as impactful. So my project was about refugees, and then more specifically using AI-assisted dermatology diagnosis with images. A little bit of a background, and then for the population, it was for Zaatari refugee camp, which is the world's largest Syrian refugee camp in Jordan, and yeah, so this is like a satellite from the top. Yeah, so it's about 80,000. I think at its peak it was like north of 150, but it's gone down a bit, but roughly 80,000. So that's like a satellite image. And then a little bit of background. I worked there on a medical mission the summer after my freshman year. And so the picture on the left is actually with dermatology, and then the right is that's surgery. So I was in the camp. I saw that there was a dire need, and that kind of motivated me to get into to want to do this project. And oh, this is also a short video from when I was there. So this is June 2022. Yeah, so like you saw it from the top and you see on the bottom. There's something Minu always talks about with refugees, but just the idea that it's basically permanent. Like these aren't tents where like they're gonna move. Like they've been there for over a decade, and I don't think they're leaving anytime soon. Like when the patient comes in, you get like a little booklet, and so like they'd come in and like the booklet's a newborn baby because like they get the booklet. I think it's like when they're 2 days old, and then the kid would walk in. He's like to my chest, and he's like he's 12, and I was like that was really heartbreaking to see, but like they're there permanently. So like trying to find the solution and not have them have to rely on like these medical missions that come every 3 or 4 months if they want to get medical treatment is something that I thought was really important. And so, oops. Oh, wait, no. Okay, so the question was why dermatology specifically, and I think so. A little bit of background, like obviously there's a lot of my anecdotes, and I think that the research that I did just supports everything that I saw with my eyes, which is the idea that if you look up any statistic about refugee camps, the number one medical condition is always going to be skin. And so just to give a little context, like for example, you see the 2.7 to 33%. 2.7 is the prevalence of eczema worldwide. More than 33% is what you see in camps. So that's like 12 and a half times greater. And this isn't just because of like the population demographic or the profile, like it's because of the conditions that they live in. So like for example, if you look at Syrian refugees that are in Germany, it's about 5 to 6%. And so it's significantly greater when you look inside the camp and in Jordan because of like the climate that they're in. And then that's not just for for eczema. So there's that study actually was done in Jordan. So you can see like the profile for like all of the most common diseases. Eczema is the biggest, but like all of these diseases are found at much higher prevalence within the camp when you compare them to what's happening in the world. And I think one thing that we have to keep in mind when we look at like the solutions and what people are doing is this idea that when the Syrian civil war started 2011, the refugee crisis starts around that time, like 2012, 2013. People didn't know that that skin was going to be a really big issue. And so they were completely oblivious. It wasn't until years later that they were like, oh, shoot, this is a big problem. And so they already started really late. And so once they find out it's a big problem, they're like, okay, we need a solution. And honestly, I have two solutions up here. It's basically one, but we'll get to that. The top is medical mission, so just a picture of them in the camp. That's basically how it happens, especially for specialties. So one thing I learned when I talked to a doctor was that they actually do have a general practitioner, but getting a specialist is like really hard, specifically, and then dermatology is even harder. And so like you have to think about it like these people, they don't get paid when they go on a mission, like it's completely volunteer. So like not only are they paying for obviously like going there, but they're also losing a week of work. And like dermatologists make a lot of money. So it's like giving up a lot to be in the camp and just donating their time. So like medical mission, so like the camps basically only serve dermatologists maybe 4 times a year. And so, and then you have the real high prevalences, that's not enough. So the one solution that I learned about when I was talking to someone in the field was derm relief. And so basically you could think like it's really hard to get a dermatologist to donate their time to fly all the way to camp. So what if we just sent pictures to a dermatologist? So basically what derm relief is like the general practitioner that's in the camp can take a picture, upload it to this app where a dermatologist can volunteer and like look at the image and diagnose, which in theory is easier than having to fly a dermatologist out there or like them fly themselves out. But the problem is you still have the limiting thing of like needing a dermatologist to volunteer, which in itself is really hard. And I think a testament to how hard it is the fact that Dermalief is currently down. So it's not really being used. I think it was up for maybe like a year. They went to the camps once and then it's not up. We're trying to get in contact with the founders because I have a mutual connection. So ideally I can talk to them because they do have good data sets and obviously insights because they worked in the field, but it's definitely a solution we want to stay away from. Like my goal was kind of get as far away from needing a doctor or a specialist there as possible because that's always going to be the limiting factor. And that's what kind of pushed us towards AI, which is basically just empowering them by like putting the tool in their hand. You're not going to have to go through a dermatologist. And I guess like when I first came up with this idea, like it's dermatology, it's with refugees. Let me talk to an expert in the field. And so I spoke to Dr. Abrar Qureshi, who is he's the department chair of dermatology at Brown. He's been on maybe 6 to 8 medical missions over the past like decade. And so he's really involved in the field and he has a lot of insights. He was actually the person, so apparently he advised the people that founded Derm Relief, so he had a lot of insight into the field. And there were two main things that he really told us, which I think were really beneficial. The first, and maybe something we didn't want to hear, was that it's a lot, and I think Manu, even when we talked about it, he's like, oh, it's easy to diagnose with the image. Like, AI can definitely do this. It's a lot harder than it seems. Like, you might think you can take a picture and like an ML model is going to be able to get it right. We're going to get to why that's not really true. But so that was kind of like not hard to hear, but like it's important to know. But one thing he also did say in that same meeting was like, no one's doing anything, let's do something. And so that was obviously like when you like everyone that we've talked to when it comes to this project, there's Abdulwahab is also with me, but he's not here today. But everyone is really excited. They're always like, okay, let's do something. But it's just there's a lot of work that has to go into it. And so the problem he was talking about, basically, he showed us a lot of papers. The one we're going to focus on, just for the sake of this presentation and time, is the one in the top left. It's actually published in February of this year. And the third author is actually from Stanford. So I sent her an email. She was great. We met with her on Monday, so we'll talk about that. But the paper really has two really key insights, which is here. If we look in the top left, basically they what they did was they tested a model, but what they also did was they tested physicians by showing them images. And so if you see those number, a board certified dermatologist only gets an initial diagnosis correct from an image without symptoms and talking to the patient 27% of the time. If you go to a primary care physician or just a general practitioner, it's 14%, so half of that. So like, so I guess the one positive like what the thing saw was that deep learning models basically like near what a board certified dermatologist would be, but like, is that equally as good or is that equally as bad? Because they're not even getting it right a third of the time, which isn't ideal. One thing I will say is that we were able to replicate this. So Abdul worked on a algorithm and we got similar to this, like 27%, slightly less because we're using a different data set, but we got access to new data sets, which is good. The one thing that was really cool in this paper, though, was the idea that when you actually pair a physician with the model, they actually perform significantly better. Like even a board certified dermatologist is better by like 30% or 40%. A primary care physician is 69% more accurate than you pair them with the deep learning system. So that was really impactful because like, okay, maybe right now we're not at a point where like we can just have them take a picture and diagnose it, but maybe we can help the general practitioner who's there, who's only correct about 14% of the time, do a little bit better. And so that's when we reached out to the third author on this paper, Dr. Oksana. So she was really awesome, and we met with her on Monday. And she had a number of insights, which I'm going to go through. So the first thing she talked about was basically focusing on empowering a primary care physician because that's where you can see the most benefit. She talked about, I think Stanford's even doing like, they have some clinical trials that they do where like they're seeing even in hospitals in the US that if you can give a primary care physician a machine learning model, they can do significantly better. And so she kind of thought we could start there because even from a technological perspective, like it's the same model that you're training, it's the same labeling of the images. It just let's have a little bit less risk and not them diagnosing themselves at home. Let's have a doctor still there to be like overseeing it, which I think is a good start. So it was a good insight. Yeah. And then two really cool things, which the hardest thing we talked about, and we've talked about this ever since we got on this project, was like, where do we find data? Because like it's hard to find good data sets. Like the images that are free online, one are all white people, and two are not the best images in terms of labeling. But there's these two data sets that she helped us gain access to, which is Fitzpatrick 17K, which is like 17,000 images, 17,000 images, and then DDI. DDI is diverse dermatology images. It's actually the data set that they used in the paper that I showed you, which is about 6 to 700, but they're like really clean labeled. They have diverse skin tones, which was actually the purpose of that paper. We've done some. And so we're gonna work with those models. The third thing she talked about is because our goal is to obviously get in the field. And one thing is like when you're in the field, like every picture they take and we gain access to is like you can iteratively train the model and obviously make it better because it's for a specific demographic. But she said that we basically need an IRB and we should work on getting an IRB ASAP. We tried saying like, is there any way we can get like under someone else's IRB because that might be easier. But she basically like, unless you can find someone that's working with the same population in the same country, it's not gonna happen. So she basically advised us to like hone in, get a specific idea, get all the details hashed out, and then apply for an IRB. So ideally we can work on that. Which brings us to what's next. We want to apply to the grant because that's due very soon. Uh, we also are working on creating a new algorithm based on the new data sets that we have access to, the Fitzpatrick and the DDI. So I think Abdul is currently working on that. So hopefully we can get that soon. Want to plan to get in the field. This has a lot of moving parts, whether it's IRB on Stanford side, also getting access to go with the organization. I'm already going with them, so I'll be in the field. Like, so there's gonna be something that I can do, but like can we actually work with patients and use the technology is a different story. So we have to get like some different approvals. There's also like a lot of stuff with the government there. But I'll be in Jordan July 5th to July 12th. Abdul may be coming with me, so it'll be cool to kind of get in the field and see what we can learn and what we can do. And then this is a little separate from the AI dermatology side, but just in general with refugees, if like we've learned of a lot of really cool tools, whether it's FoldScope, SnapDX, Inkblot. So like connecting any of these Frugal tools to refugee communities, I think would be something really cool and that I'd be interested in doing in the near future. And then thank you to the teaching team and everyone.
Questions, comments? Yeah, it's really rare to have that kind of field insights. So this is phenomenal. Yeah, I think maybe on the population side, IRBs are even more trickier when working with vulnerable populations. And you had also mentioned certain threads around, skin is something that's very private and certain kind of social. I'm wondering whether there is an intermediate ground to prove the technology and test. It's still in the same population, but not refugee. So the climate is the same, some of the abundance is the same. That's where the tool is tested first or validated in a neighboring population. I don't know whether that makes sense for Jordan. Do you see what I mean? Like finding a hospital in Jordan, would that give us the right, or maybe it won't?
It made so the paper from where I showed the breakdown was actually so there was about medical missions in Jordan, but like even when I go, like we have there's like because the government doesn't like when you just like they don't like that you're just helping the Syrians, and so they're like, no, you have to do clinics in Jordan as well. So like that paper was I think majority refugee, but also in the paper they talk about like neighboring just like cities and clinics that they worked at, and then also like in the summer we also just
very specifically for IRB, there are certain sensitivities around that, and it might just be easier to get approvals. And the study site could be right outside first, just so that there is more than academic. For IRBs, it's not just here; it's also in the field, and we could find a study partner who's in the field